I want to start with what actually triggered this identity collapse between 2016 and 2020. So, 2016 was really the psychological rupture point. I know that's when I started really feeling the call to leave corporate, although it took me time to actually do that. I did it the following year. But 2016 is really when I decided that the life that I had built, the life that I was living, really didn't feel like me anymore. And it was a feeling that I couldn't really ignore. It was something that came out of nowhere that had been in the back of my mind for a while, but I was ignoring it because I didn't know what else to do. I felt like if I don't do this and I'm not defined by this, like what else is there? I had no roadmap or reference point of what it looked like to follow your own path and how to do that in a way that felt good to me, that wasn't destabilizing and disorienting. And so there was this sudden polarization that I think a lot of people have been experiencing, and a collapse of shared reality as well, that has led to this end of institutional trust. Even in education and in corporate settings, we're not trusting that these paths that we're told to follow are really going to provide us this stability that it is we were promised previously. So there's been a rise of this individual awakening that social media has really accelerated the identity fragmentation that's been occurring as well. So maybe there's visibility without grounding. So we're seeing a lot of different options, but it seems out of reach. There's nothing really that feels like we are sharing a reality. So there's this constant comparison because what's being shown on social media is really about this reality in this world that more often than not doesn't really exist. We see a lot of luxury, we see a lot of influencer content where people are creating these perfectly aesthetic lives, and it feels very like Black Mirror like, where behind the scenes, it's really not the truth of what people are experiencing. And even for those who have successfully built businesses online, the truth of what it takes to really have that level of visibility to build a business, I know personally, requires a lot of identity work behind the scenes, especially if you're starting from a point where you haven't had access to money or you haven't had access to a luxury reality. And so there's this constant comparison that we see, even if someone is living on a level that seems similar to you. Maybe they're going to certain experiences that you want access to, or they seem to be doing better in their career. It's always this energy of keeping up with the Joneses that I think social media has contributed to this identity fragmentation. And we see so many options and possibilities of who we could possibly be that it leaves us wondering, well, who am I and how do I fit into this reality? How do I fit into all of this? And so we've been conditioned to really perform a self versus being a self. And no one really teaches us how to be yourself. We see people talking about being authentic and just be yourself, but we don't really know how to do that. I know personally, and I started sharing a lot of my story here with you all and also on my Instagram. If you're interested, head over there, give me a follow. I'm sharing a lot of my childhood history, not from an oversharing standpoint, but for context of the dual identities that I grew up living between. I went to a very prestigious private boarding school, day school, where the socioeconomic difference between those in my school and my home life, where was a vast contrast. On top of my racial identity and the environment that I was in, I grew up living between two different worlds and continued that pattern really through adulthood. I still feel like now I see a lot of different worlds that I don't necessarily fit into, but pieces of them are pieces of me. So I've created my own world, my own ecosystem with my business and my own reality that feels good to me, but no one really tells you how to do that and to do it in a way that maintains your stability as well. And so along with this, figuring out how to really be yourself and not perform yourself, there are so many layers of unraveling that you have to go through to really get to the core of who you are without who you were told to be, without these inherited identities. We inherit identities from our families. Maybe it's our friends in our social circle or our corporate environment. I know when I worked in corporate, I had a totally different identity because my life really was formed around my work week. And the time that I had left over was for my hobbies and my interests, but my life was really centered around the work and the company that I was building for someone else. I always say, I'm never here to tell you to leave your job, to leave corporate. That is not my intention at all. But I know that there is a trend, there's a pattern where between the 300,000 Black women that have been laid off and people that are feeling that they have built lives and careers that no longer align with who they are, people are leaving corporate environments. They're not feeling good in them anymore. And so, what is happening on a global level is this uncertainty that is dissolving this illusion of stability where we thought we could rely on the institutions, the government, these corporate jobs to keep us safe. And now we're seeing that that's not necessarily true. Between economic shifts and cultural pressures, there's this mass burnout that we're experiencing, and no one's really addressing it. Like, we're talking about it, but in terms of resources, we see a lot of mental health resources. We see maybe some financial resources, but no one's really talking about identity. What happens when you're grieving a life and a version of you that simply isn't existing anymore, and a world that is dissolving before our eyes? And on top of that, it's like we're emotionally overstimulated. So I think that people really stopped being able to anchor themselves in the external world like we used to. You could build your identity on what you did for work, how successful you were, and really the value that you were bringing into the world. And we're shifting into a time now where it's going to be more about who you are at your core, your identity and your authenticity as your strategy rather than logic and following a specific path. Now it's following your own path based on your intuition and what is coming up in you from as your truth. And so everyone has started to, well, not everyone, but many of us have started to unravel internally as we try to figure out and navigate this new reality that we're living in. And so between 2020, that was 2016 to 2020, we all know what happened in 2020. And we started seeing things like the Great Resignation. You can also call it the Great Confrontation. Between 2020 and 2022, so many of us had these awakenings where we realized, I want to do something different with my life, or we had realizations about self. And this global slowdown really exposed a lot of truths because the pandemic forced stillness, and that stillness forced us to be more honest with ourselves. And honesty really forced the confrontation with new identity. But I think because we were so isolated and we were so ready to get back into the world, we thought that things would go back to normal. That's what everyone kept saying. I can't wait for things to go back to normal. But what hasn't really been addressed is that normal, we never went back to that. It doesn't exist anymore. The pandemic really shaped us and changed who we were. It changed our identities to live through a tragedy like that collectively and to be so isolated for such a long period of time. It's really a once in a lifetime experience that I think many people haven't recovered from. And there's a trauma there that hasn't really been addressed that has impacted who we are, how we relate to each other, and how we show up in the world. So, some of the questions that people started asking themselves are, why am I living like this? Who am I without work? What am I sacrificing? And why do I feel disconnected from myself? And we saw platforms like TikTok blow up because it was one of the first places where people could show up authentically and be rewarded for that. Historically, our system has not rewarded authenticity. It's rewarded conformity, performance to fit inside of this box. And even still, there aren't really structures for people who don't fit inside of that box. Social media, content creation, people on TikTok, they really had the opportunity and showed the way of what it can look like to show up and be yourself. That's still one very specific avenue because not everyone's meant to be on social media. Not everyone's a performer or a creator. So, where does that leave the people who feel like they don't fit into the traditional box, but aren't necessarily wanting to show up on a platform like TikTok? So there's this collective grief and personal awakening where we've had the end of performance identities and a redistribution of values that's created this fracture between old selves and emerging selves. And so once you see the truth of your life and the truth of what you want to see your life to be, you really cannot go back to sleep. And it leaves you at this point where you're in between worlds, where you've left behind your old reality, but the new one hasn't quite formed yet. And part of that is independent work. And another part of that is waiting for the world to catch up. Our entire system, especially in the United States, depending on where you're watching, it's completely changing. So, what does that look like for us? We don't fully know yet. And I think it leaves us in this place where all we can really rely on, all that we can really change is ourselves. And so, leading from within, becoming more sovereign, and really trusting that your intuition and your identity is going to lead the way to wherever it is that you want to be. So that was 2020 to 2022. Now, 2023 to 2025 was the identity collapse. This is when the identity collapse started to fully emerge and the old identity became really impossible to maintain. I know for me, it was like a really wild awakening where I realized so much of the reality that I was living in, my business, the way I was living my life. There were so many hidden things that came into my awareness from the back of my psyche. I always go like this when I talk about subconscious. I don't know if that's actually where that part of your brain is, but in my head it is. But that is when the old identity really became impossible to maintain. So there was actually a resistance and a confrontation with the misalignment within your spirit, within your soul, that you maybe started to notice around this time where you felt internal resistance, emotional exhaustion, body revolting, like physically could not be in the same spaces that used to work for me. And then your intuition started spiking. It was like you were feeling things in a new way. And you had to learn how to really navigate that because until you understand how your body works and how intuition works, when your spiritual gifts start to come online, or you start relying on your intuition a bit more, it can be really disorienting because you question, am I crazy or am I really feeling something different? And that's not for everyone. Some of us are already really familiar with what we feel. But for those of us who haven't been taught that it's okay to feel and that what you feel is something that you can trust, it can be very jarring when those gifts start to come online and you realize that you've suppressed so much of what it is that you actually want. And so the systems fail. When systems fail, people begin to shift and work no longer aligns. Relationships start being misaligned. Career success stops feeling successful and motivation changes form. What used to motivate you in the past really doesn't work anymore. And discomfort is what really becomes the catalyst. You know, we don't really change unless we begin to feel so uncomfortable. And I know for me, I'm working on this because I will get the signs and it takes me so long. Like I get so uncomfortable to the point where it's like just can't take it anymore. And then that's when I'll take a change. And so people are naturally, I think, resistant to change. We're creatures of comfort, and change can feel so scary, especially in a world and a society that doesn't tell you how to live and how to be outside of these very specific paths. So when you start to feel uncomfortable with the path that you're on and you're feeling things like this doesn't feel right anymore, I can't pretend anymore, or I'm outgrowing everything at the same time, it's terrifying because again, it feels like if it's not this, then what? And there's no roadmap to show you that. And it feels like you're losing yourself. And you can, if you're not paying attention to what's happening to you and really learning how to ground yourself in the experience that you're having. But what's really happening is that you're outgrowing the identity that you built to survive your old life, your previous chapter, the way that things used to work. And so as this new reality forms, this new culture and society that we're co-creating together, comes with a new identity for you as well, a new way of thinking, a new way of being, and a new way of navigating the world and society. And so the emotional reality of this collapse is what a lot of women have been feeling, which is restlessness, disorientation. There's a lot of like clarity mixed with fear or grief for the old self, and a desire for something that's more aligned. And it feels really, really intense because you're between identities and you no longer resonate with the past, even though the future version of you hasn't really arrived yet. So it feels like you're in this hallway with no doors yet. And that can be a very claustrophobic feeling. But this is the discomfort that comes before alignment when you're really being rewired. Now, the identity reconstruction era between 2025 and 2027, that's the beginning of where we are now. We felt the first experiences with that this year with the year of the snake. We really shed these old identities. I won't say for the very last time because everyone's on different timelines. We have different experiences, and your path is your own. So, what may be happening for me and someone else may be happening faster or slower or hasn't even begun for you. But for a lot of us, this year was really about shedding an old skin, taking off those final layers of an identity that no longer fits you. This goes for relationships, careers, anything in your life that wasn't truly aligned with the core of who you are and the identity that's being formed. We really saw that stripped away. So now, here in December of 2025, depending on when you're watching this, we're really sitting here kind of naked and healing from the rawness that was this year. There were a lot of illusions stripped away. I know for me personally that I never thought I would see, but that is what happened. And so the reason that this collapse happened is because a lot of our old identities were built on external validation, and our new identity has to come from internal authority. So anything that was performance based or you were doing it because you thought you should, that had to go. That is the old way. And the new way is this feels good. This feels aligned. It's coming from what my intuition and my internal authority is saying is best for me rather than being impacted and really formed from the outside. And so you couldn't really become who you were meant to be from this old identity because it wasn't based in your own truth. And what reconstruction in this era really looks like is shedding that performance identity and rebuilding from your true desire, not duty, not what you think you have to do, and listening to your intuition over expectation, rewriting your values. Our values are changing, and what matters to us now is different than what mattered to us before and will continue to be so because everything's changing and how we relate to the world is changing based on the society that's collapsing before our very own eyes. So we'll be reclaiming our sovereignty because we're realizing we can't rely on these structures, and the only thing we have that we can really rely on and trust is ourselves. So 2026 and 2027 really represent 2026, the identity suspension and recalibration. This is the year where we're really stepping into these new identities after a year of shedding. Now we have an opportunity to really practice being this new version of ourselves, trying on new things, seeing what fits, what feels good, what doesn't. And then moving into 2027 is when we really reemerge and we've embodied all of these lessons. We've really gotten solid in this new energy. And this is when clarity comes in, new career paths, new, better, and more aligned relationships and opportunities can meet us in this new place, aligned with our new identity. And it can sound really scary, but it's for your highest good if it's something that you and your soul decide that you want to embark on a journey towards. Because the end goal is not to change who you are, it's really to change and align your reality to align with who you truly are rather than this identity that you feel like you've had to perform in order to succeed or be loved or receive opportunities. It's not like that anymore. You can now show up as your full self, which is really exciting because who you are at your core, I always think of the little version of us, the little boy or girl and whoever you were when before the world told you who you had to be. We're going back to that, except in our adult body, and it's exciting, but it's also scary because we don't know how to be that version of ourselves. We have to practice being in that identity and in a new, mature way? How does it look as an adult with me being my true self? And so this era is not really about becoming someone new, it's about returning to the core of who you truly are. So I want to share a little bit of guidance for women specifically in this transition. Not that men can't listen to this advice, but I'm not a man. And so I can't direct you as well as, or can't relate to your experience as a man as I can as being a woman. So when you really, I think what we all need to hear right now as women is that there's nothing wrong with us, that we're not behind, we are evolving. I know so many of us are high achievers, high performers, especially those of you that listen to my work and are here subscribed to Alignment Recess, which the name may be changing soon, but stay tuned on that. We really pride ourselves on the work that we do and being able to show up and get it right and do things well. And there's a lot of deconditioning that has to happen to feel comfortable in not always having the answer, not always knowing what's next, but still feeling valuable and showing up in that. And so, any type of confusion that you feel is normal because it's a sign of recalibration. And in those moments, instead of forcing clarity, which you can't do anymore, anyways, really take that time to be still, practice stillness. And stillness doesn't have to mean sitting and staring at the wall or meditating. I always want to make that clear. It means doing things that bring you joy, doing things that allow you to play, painting, running, going to a pottery class. These are all things that I enjoy. Whatever it is for you that allows you to take your mind, take your energy out of your mind and put you back into your body, because you're really shedding this old identity, and you have to be graceful with yourself and give yourself space to feel that and really grieve your old identity. So, what can you do during this reconstruction? Slow down. You listen to your intuition, practice listening to your intuition, because most of us haven't really learned how to do that. We've suppressed that. We've gone on logic. What makes the most sense? What's going to work? What is going to give me the metrics of success? And now it's, how do I listen to my intuition? What is my body saying? And trusting that that is enough. This is the biggest thing, is building up that self trust with your body. And you may make mistakes with that, and that's okay. Just remind yourself that it's normal, that it's okay to make mistakes, and practice building that relationship with yourself. It's the same as building a relationship with someone else. You try things, you see what works, what doesn't, you communicate. Do the same things with yourself. How does this feel? I'm not sure. Let me try it. Okay, didn't like that. Now I have data to know that that's not the right path for me. I know that there can be a lot of energy, time, and resources that we are afraid to lose as we try new things. But I want to reassure you that it's necessary for the process, and getting aligned and getting to that point where you're able to really feel like you know for sure, because you've had the data and the experience to say, this is who I want to be, is going to rebuild that self trust for you and going to give you the confidence that you need to get back whatever resources, time, energy that you spent. You can get that back. And so you can not force clarity in this season. Really have to take the time to release any identities that were built on survival. Allow your desires to lead you. Use discernment in terms of what's best for you, and just prepare for a new version of yourself. And you can make it fun. You guys, I've been trying on new clothes and figuring out, these are the things that come after. They're more surface, but you can see yourself like an avatar. That has made it really fun for me, of like, who is this version of me? How does she show up? How does she speak? How does she dress? What is her hair like? Who does she spend her time with? What environments is she in? If you ever liked video games, I love playing games. That has Gamifying this whole experience has been really, really fun for me. And so we don't want to do any spiritual bypassing. This is also a very real thing that's happening in your reality. And there's a lot of, real things that you have to consider, and navigating that in terms of relationships and jobs and opportunity and income, I know is very important to make sure that you're not destabilizing yourself. But at the same time, it's finding flexibility and flow and allowing yourself to get back into that rhythm of play and joy and letting go a little bit, not feeling like you have to be so logical all the time because you'll notice it's not working anyways. And so your new identity is going to arrive the moment that you stop performing the old one. And it's not something that you can think your way through. You have to feel your way through it. Okay. And so I want to leave you with this. I want to share a little bit about my lived experience. In some of the coming videos and messages that I share with you. But I will just say that my lived experience really mirrors this collective timeline. I've navigated this shift for over a decade. I know that's part of my purpose and my calling is to see a little bit ahead, especially as a cultural futurist. That's one of my gifts. I can see the shifts that are coming in, and I've been practicing and navigating that over the last decade. And so I've trialed and erred lots of different things in terms of shifting your identity and really creating the language for what this is. Even before I had the language for it, I was navigating it. And so now I really help women put words to the experiences that they've been carrying silently. Most importantly, navigating future shaping shifts so that you can position yourself for what's next in your chapter and also what's happening collectively. So my role as a cultural futurist is pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, identity mapping, and giving cultural context so you can have a strategic advantage for yourself, your life, your business, and really prepare and position yourself for what's next in alignment with you and your core identity, not following my path or the path of anyone else, really forming your own and following that in a way that feels good to you. So if you're in this shift and you're seeking guidance and you'd like to work with me privately, I'm opening space in 2026 for clients to work with me. I will link the application here. You can also apply at TiffanyLaurenJones.com. Thank you so much for joining. If you have questions, feel free to DM me, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.